welcome to Two Guys and a Stack of Comics. I'm Reed.
I'm Mike, and we are coming to you from Dragon's Lair, San Antonio.
Today we are going to talk about the Flashpoint event in the comic books, as well as how it's been portrayed in kind of other media. This kind of comes on the heels of our review of the Flash movie, which we'll also have posted. In the review of the Flash, we kind of talked about why we thought that was an overall disappointing adaptation of the story. And so what we're going to do today is kind of talk about what we thought was great about the comics and a couple of other things.
Yeah, I mean this story, such an awesome story for a Flash fan. When it came out, it was just it was just really cool. Jeff Johns, Andy Kubert doing the art.
Mm-hmm.
Just a really good partnership of both of them working in tandem on a great book, great story, great art. How can you go wrong?
Yeah, and it's one of those
unless
books
you get
that just
Hollywood
does
involved.
everything right.
If you get
Yeah, no, it's about the only way you can mess it up. And,
right.
like you said, that tandem of Jeff Johns and Kubert works so well because Johns, at least in the comic book format, is so good at understanding what drives the characters. Whether it's Hal Jordan or Arthur Curry or Barry, kind of any character that he has an extended chance to write, he really digs into the soul of that character. And I think Flashpoint is just a great example of that. And as talked about with Andy Kubert, the great thing he does throughout is kind of just his ability to draw characters and really work as an artist for all of them. There's some artists you look at and go, okay, that's a Batman artist, but they couldn't draw like someone like the Flash.
Oh yeah, you were talking about that earlier.
You know, like someone like Jim Lee, right? He can always draw Batman. He can always draw Superman.
Always draw Superman.
But when he draws the Flash, he's always like the Flash is always very bulked up and kind of looks like the Flash took a steroid cocktail before he went to work that day.
Yeah.
Kubert does a great job in this comic of the Flash has a distinct look. Batman has a distinct look. Wonder Woman, Aquaman, every character in this book kind of fits their classic look, and it's not just conformed to one kind of art style.
And we'll show some panels a little bit later how you could tell that Andy Kubert is like paying homage to, you know, the creators of the characters, like, you know, Carmine Infantino, and how he created the Flash in the late 50s and 60s, and yeah, I mean, there's just it's just really. It's really good when you get two great artists like that coming together.
And they come together, it just works.
It's just gonna work, and
it's one of those stories that kind of shows why comics is such a great medium. It's one of those things where you're only limited by your imagination. Unlike Hollywood or TV shows, there's no budget that you need. You can use whatever characters that are available, and if you know the characters and you have the skill, you can create a great piece like this.
So I wasn't buying modern Flash comics when this came out. Shame on me. So I'm going to rely on you to tell me a little bit about the history and the tie-ins that were coming out at this point. I only recently, in the last couple of years, started filling in my collection for all the modern Flash. I stopped buying Flash in the 80s when DC killed
Barry
him.
bit the bullet and
DC killed him. And I didn't buy the Flash that came out in 87 with Wally West. I didn't buy that until now. And then about 10 years ago or so, I decided to start subscribing to Flash again. But by that point, this had already come out. And everyone was talking about it, and I remember, you know, about 10 years ago, this book came out, this is more than 10 years old.
2011, so about maybe 10, 12 years
Yeah, oh, have you read Flashpoint? I'm like, you know, as an old Flash fan, I was like, yeah, I didn't really like the new Flash that came out in the late 80s, and I was just kind of afraid to venture in. But of course, eventually I did, and there's some great stories. And this is one of the greatest ones of all time.
Yeah, one of the things that was great about Flashpoint, I think, myself being, you know, someone who was born in the 80s and kind of got into comics in the mid-90s, is that comics has kind of been infested with events all the time, right? Events, there's always an event every year, and they always promise it's going to have massive change, and things are going to be different forever afterwards, and then it never really delivers on it. And where Flashpoint to me was great, it was one of those rare events that actually delivered that. It promised it would change things, and it really did. Was it for better or worse, the changes that happened because this led to the New 52? That's up for debate, but it did deliver on its promise. And what's great about this is someone who was not really a huge Flash fan. I've always been more of a Batman, Wolverine, Daredevil, kind of more of those, not anti-heroes, but darker heroes. This comic book really introduced me to the Flash, and kind of as a character made me want to go hunt down some of those older runs and continue buying the character. What was good with this is Barry had been dead since about the 80s when this story happened with Crisis, and Jeff Johns, the writer of this event, brought him back in a story called Flash Rebirth. And that kind of established a new continuity for Barry, and you kind of found out that Thawne had killed his mom. I could try and travel in the past to Reverse Flash, and so that really set the stage for this story.
And it has been the Flash mythos ever since.
Yeah.
And everything that's come after that Jeff Johns retelling of Barry Allen, and it's carried on into the TV show, into the movie. It has been the new
kind of status quo.
Status quo.
Flash.
It was like, it was like when Showcase 4 came out in 1956. They recreated the Flash, and Jeff Johns reinvented him and did a wonderful job. And this is the part of the video where if you haven't read Flashpoint,
it's probably something you should read.
You should read it, and you may want. There's spoilers. Would you?
We'll spoil it, but it's still worth experiencing.
You probably have read it, and just will engage in the conversation that we have.
Well, I think especially if the only version you're seeing is the movie version of it, or if you watched maybe the Flash TV show, which did a better job than the movie, but this is a far superior story to it.
Yeah. They did it good in this one.
Now, yes, this was the Flashpoint Paradox, I believe is what they call that one.
Yeah, Flashpoint Paradox.
That's almost a kind of very truth-telling or kind of very accurate description of the story depicted in movie form. So
absolutely,
it did a really great job with that.
So let's dive into the.
Yeah, you can kind of show your favorite parts. We both have some ones that we've really
I've got some
liked
stuff
in here.
bookmarked in here, and I like the way that it started off. And again, this just was like, I guess, chapter 2 of Jeff Johns after he he gave Barry a new origin. But it's just great artwork. Like, look at that. That's awesome.
And where it's really cool is that the book really held a lot of surprises as you read it. I think that was something that the art really captures on that, and that you're seeing familiar things. As you showed that one there, you've got a Batman that appears in the book, but he's got a very different costume. I really love right at the start of the story, you kind of have this 2-page splash page of Flashpoint Batman, which is cool. Kind of this very different Gotham City, and it really just takes you into a different world with this story. One of the things I think the comic just did a great job with is, as a reader, you're thrown into the middle of this Flashpoint universe with no idea how this happened. And I think the comic as a story is greater for that, because you yourself are kind of wondering how all of this came to be.
And it just drives you forward. Like, all of a sudden, like, Barry wakes up, he's got no powers, the world's different.
Iris is gone, she's with somebody else.
And then he tries to track down Batman to help him do this to him.
To get his powers back. You find out Batman is Thomas Wayne, and that the bullet hit Bruce.
Look at that corner page right there with just the eyeballs and the lightning bolts in it. I mean, this is great, Andy Kubert.
So many great panels like that capture these characters in a different light. And what really, really works overall for this story is the fact that it kind of puts you in this different universe, and you yourself are wondering what's going on.
You guys remember this panel where Barry gets his powers and saves Batman right away?
No, it's such a cool story for that, and I think the fact that it does change things up, you as a reader are wondering what happened. I think that's where it's a superior story to the movie, where you kind of know from the outset that this was done by Barry. Whereas the book, you're kind of every page,
you don't know
won't even pick it up.
And then such great graphic storytelling from the page here, where now we know that Barry's going to have his powers again. But then you go to this clandestine scene with Lois Lane as she's undercover, in New Themyscira, kind of trying to,
investigate this war that's
Wonder
happening.
Woman, and trying to infiltrate. I mean, it's so good. And then she gets caught, and you're like, oh my gosh.
And the kind of overall story structure of it is basically in this new world, Aquaman and Wonder Woman are having this kind of all-out war that's killing millions of people. There is no Superman. The Justice League does not exist. There's no Flash. Batman is Thomas Wayne instead of Bruce because of the changes in the timeline.
Crazy.
And he's a much darker, much more depressing character, even than Bruce, which is kind of crazy. And he's seen as a killer. You kind of just see he's in this very dark mode. The other thing the story did as well is there's stuff like this with the Flashpoint Batman, where even outside of the main series, there was a lot of kind of tie-in stories like this that really go into what's going on with Thomas Wayne. There's some great twists with who the Joker is in this universe.
Did they also tie it into Aquaman and Wonder Woman?
Yeah, I think there was tie-ins with Aquaman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern. It was really a universe-wide event that really captured that. And so I think the big things that stand out to me in this story that we talked about when we did this in the movie review, we talked about some things that we didn't like about the movie and why the comic was superior. And to me, the biggest reason is the case is that despite the fact that this is this huge line-wide event that features all of the DC universe, it never loses the focus on Barry. You are seeing the story from Barry's perspective. It is his story. It is his growth, and there's a character arc for him.
And there was a recent one that came out to talk about that point where they tried to cross-event everything. And even when they tried to do the Watchmen, when they Doomsday Clock, remember that?
Yep.
And it's like I don't know, the character was, diluted. And and they would throw things in. Like, I'd be reading Flash and there'd be like a Watchmen part in it. And I'd be like, well, what does this have to do with the storyline that I'm actually reading, right now?
Yeah.
It's just kind of
kind of seems random and sort of like
it does. But this one was
lesser
done
version
so well.
of the character. And so I think the fact that it's kept that focus on Barry the whole time. I think the other thing this is for me is I think this is a fantastic story, or the best story of Barry versus the Reverse Flash, in that the entire book really exists in the mind of Barry that it had to have been Thawne.
It's got to be him. And then he taunts him at the end. He taunts him at the end saying, ha, 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 where is that classic?
I think it's
he's just laughing at him he's laughing at him. He's having so much fun with Barry.
Well, in the whole story, you're led to believe it has to have been
And then
Thawne.
this panel right here. What did you do to the world? What did you do to this world? And then Thawne's just laughing it off. He's like, the funny part of it is. And then when I first read this, I was like, he's lying to him.
Yeah.
Because you didn't know.
Yeah, no, and that's the great thing with this is it really did truly have a surprise in that. I remember reading this when it came out. You had no idea it was Barry. You truly believed it was Thawne. And I think that's why it's a great story for Thawne, is that the entire time Barry is so convinced it had to have been him. The entire story is propelled forward by that. And then also the reason, when you find out that it is Barry, the entire reason Barry did it.
And Thawne's like, do you remember?
No, the entire reason Barry did it is because of something that Thawne did to him, and killing his mother.
Yeah.
And to me, it just establishes Thawne clearly as Barry's best villain. There's a lot of great Flash villains. The Rogues are fantastic. You gotta love Captain Cold and Captain Boomerang and some of the great ones. But Thawne, this story kind of makes him almost like the Joker for Barry.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think that was really good. And it's funny because with non-comic book fans, I've watched the Flash TV show with my wife, and even she knows Thawne now. She'll watch, she'll see that actor show up in anything at Kavanaugh, and she's like, "Oh, it's the Reverse Flash."
And I wrote in my notes, the Flash is kind of like a third-tier character when it comes to the superhero universe, and now with the show, the TV show, it's been going for 9 years, and people know who the Reverse Flash is. Extremely obscure 30 years ago in the lexicon of
comic books.
Right,
sure.
right. Now everybody
Barry's not like Batman, where kind of everyone knows what's going on.
And so you've got fans that just like Thawne.
Yeah, no,
they're
you
like
do have
hardcore Thawne fans, and it's like, wow, he's got his own fan base.
No, so it truly is one of the best comic book events that's ever been produced. I think it truly capitalized on what it said it was going to do.
Like this scene here when Superman finally comes.
No, you even get stuff like that with Superman coming up to save the day at the end.
I mean, that's so cool.
And the movie does follow some of the plot beats of the comic, but like Mike was saying a lot with some of these modern events that happen, it's a diluted version of it. You feel like you're watching a weaker version of that story. It truly is it's a great Flash story. It's got a lot of great surprises, fantastic art throughout, and it really stays true to all of the characters, even in this different world. that's there, and I thought that was just really cool to see. Mike kind of showed it earlier. There's the animated adaptation of this that does a very faithful
It's really
recreation
pretty good.
of it.
Although I don't like the way they draw Flash.
Yeah, Flash is a little bulky in that one. But
Thomas Wayne's jaw is like extra massive.
yeah, Thomas Wayne's jaw is like a literal piece of granite that shows up in there. And just overall, they capitalized on it. The TV show also did a Flashpoint adaptation. And with that, obviously they had a very limited budget, very little access to characters. But even them, I think they did a better job than the movie.
It was a 2-episode arc, right?
Yeah, it was only 2 episodes. It's still focused on Thawne. But even with the low budget they had, no access to Justice League, can't do this huge war between Aquaman and Wonder Woman. They still at least took risks and made it focused on Barry and kind of changed the character.
They told the basic story of how you can't go back.
Mm-hmm.
And it made the Grant Gustin Barry Flash learn that lesson.
Yeah.
Which was an important setup to events that would happen later.
Yeah.
When they did later stuff in the Flash series. This one here is another one of my favorites. You haven't shown any of your favorites. But this one here, I love how the Flash is drawn across the 2-page spread. It's an homage of Andy Kubert, of the old way that Infantino used to draw the multiple image, the strobe image, they call it, of Flash.
Now, for me in the story, one of the things that really stands out to me at the end is, as a massive Batman fan, kind of always reads things through the spectrum of Batman. At the end of the story, kind of to provide spoilers, Barry's gone on this adventure with Batman's father, who is the Flashpoint Batman.
Oh my
and after
gosh,
resetting the timeline,
yeah.
He kind of comes back to the regular DC universe, or as we found out later, the New 52 universe. And there's a great scene in here where he kind of gives Bruce the letter that he has from Bruce's father. And it actually kind of brings Batman to tears in the comic, which as a Batman fan I should hate, but it's actually a great character moment.
When a writer and an artist can do that for a character and still give it credibility, especially for a Batman fan, to see that and go, okay, it's believable. You didn't break Batman, who would never cry.
Yeah.
It's what would Batman cry about?
Rare things that could do that. And
yeah, and that just goes to the whole writing of the story. The story well told can do that to a character, and a fan will still believe it and understand and go there with the writer and the story.
Yeah.
And this is one of those rare story arcs that really took you along for the ride. It went fantastical places. Like, you're going to replace Batman with his father. You're going to have Thawne as the big bad, but then all of a sudden it's really the main character. It's really Barry who messed everything up. So many unbelievable things happen. You're going to have Batman and Wonder Woman destroying the world.
Aquaman,
Aquaman and Wonder Woman destroying the world. How is that going to work? Well, you get a great writer like Jeff Johns. You get an amazing artist like Andy Kubert, and they pull it off one for the ages.
Yep.
And that's why it's so sad.
Well, it brings it back to the movie. Yeah, and the weirdest thing reading this, and I read it, quite often. I think I've read it about 7 or 8 times at this point. But the weirdest thing the movie does is you could not have actually asked for a better setup for a Flashpoint movie than what DC actually had going into this
all their
movie.
Ducks were in a row. They could have pulled this off.
Well, in the story itself, it highlights Shazam in a very huge way. It highlights the Flash. It highlights Wonder Woman, Aquaman. You have an older version of Batman, which, okay, you want to substitute that in the movies to use Michael Keaton. Use
it was
Superman.
All there. It was
you had all of the elements. It's almost as if the first 7 or 8 years of the DC movies were setting this up.
And then you had a Barry Allen that the fans were not quite comfortable with, and you wrote 2 of them into a script, and that's just kind of sad.
That's what happens when you try to improve on something that doesn't need to be improved.
So, if they were going to take Ezra Miller's Barry Allen and write a movie that wasn't Flashpoint, that was something else, I would have rolled with that. I'll roll with the Flash movie anyway because it's a Flash movie. I got to see it. But I mean, they could have gone someplace with that, like the troubled kid in the Justice League movie. That
ton of circumstances they could have
with. And I would have rolled with that. Like that's. But then they tried to do this, and then they couldn't do this. And I don't know why they didn't. You say Jeff Johns wrote a version?
I think Jeff Johns was involved with the movies. I know in the film they had a bunch of different writers come in. I think the folks behind the Spider-Verse movies wrote versions of it, and they've gone on to produce better movies than The Flash. I think they were let go of
But that's the other thing. What about the new Spider-Man movie, the animated one?
It's funny.
It was very... When I was watching, I was thinking, this is very Flash-like. And that was before the Flash movie came out.
No, and that's, I think, what made the Flash movie do so badly at the box office. There's a lot of reasons it did bad, but one of the reasons is there was literally a superhero movie 2 weeks before the Flash came out that did this kind of story infinitely better.
But those were the writers were originally,
and that was the creative. Tasked. Yeah, a lot of those guys that were involved with that movie were originally tasked to be in the Flash, and they were let go. There was just so many different people who were let go, and I think that's the saddest thing for me watching reading this and seeing what they did the movie adaptation of it.
But go back and watch the Spider-Verse movie and tell me if you don't think it feels like similar. It feels like a Flash movie.
For sure.
Like Miles has to go back in time to save his father because his father died, and it's a time traveling thing. And I'm watching it, I'm thinking this is very flashy.
Well, there's that whole concept of like there's events that if you do it, it'll break the universe,
right.
And that's very very much the kind of basis of this.
That's
story.
The whole thing. That whole trope, began here.
And I think the cardinal sin the movie makes, and I've seen the movie twice now, just because I guess I'm either a glutton for punishment or I just like seeing Michael Keaton back as Batman that much. But the biggest thing I hate is Barry doesn't even learn the lesson in the movie. The great thing in the comic book is it eventually kind of leads Barry to learn that you can't play God. You cannot go back and change time. What has happened, and if you do that, it will irrevocably break things. In the movie, Barry learns that lesson, but then still changes things by like moving the can of soup up so that his dad can be exonerated. So he doesn't even learn the lesson that you can't go back and change things. And that, again, it almost defeats the entire purpose of the movie. Because instead of it being a great character story where he learns something, it's just, he just breaks time again, just in a smaller way. So it's just massively disappointing.
If you want to see this in movie form, you can watch the animated version because it's really pretty good.
Yep.
And it's on, is it on Netflix?
I think it's on HBO Max currently.
Yeah.
It's on there, and you can pick it up pretty cheap for on Amazon
but it's
or something like that.
It's pretty good adaptation.
It's a great adaptation, and it stays close to the characters, and it's just one of those things. Again,
they even had Slade Wilson in the animated one. They captured most of it.
No, it's got all the characters, and again, it's just one of those things where DC is in the movies. They keep trying to fix things that aren't broke. And that's been from the beginning where they decided to make it like everybody's going to be dark and depressing and movies aren't really going to connect and trying to do too much. And it's just, man, as a DC fan, it's brutal to see a great comic like this reduced to what we got in the theaters.
What we're hoping is that this reboot with Gunn
can lead to better material.
Yeah.
No, I think we'll kind of expand on it in another video. Maybe that's the next one we'll do is kind of what we're hoping Gunn will do. But going into, I know we still have Blue Beetle and Aquaman 2 coming out this year. Hopefully those are okay.
I think Blue Beetle is going to be good.
Trailer looks good, but DC's always good at cutting a trailer.
I thought this one was going to be great.
No, they're great at cutting a trailer, and then you go to the movie and you realize all the plot points that you wanted to see were in the trailer. I would hope that as DC reboots that eventually they can just get back to character-focused storytelling like this comic does, instead of just kind of having the equivalent of just banging action figures against each other and calling it a plot like they do with these movies where it's just CGI and you can just tell it's like, what 2 lines of dialogue do we need to lead into the next fight scene, or what dumb joke do we need to insert to make it happen. I mean, there were more fake Back to the Future references in this Flash movie than anything to actually honor the Flash. And it's terribly disappointing. I hope with the reboot they can kind of clean that up and just give us a more concise, clear, DC universe going forward.
Yep. The more story is, if you want a really good Flash story,
check out Flashpoint. Definitely worth a read.
Even though we just told everybody the whole plot.
Told you the point, but it's still great. Read it for yourself. Check out the book. It's great.
Yeah.
If the movie is the only exposure you have to it, you are sorely missing out on a great, great Flash story and a great DC Universe story.
Tell us what you think about Flashpoint in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and
we will see you in the next video.
two guys and a stack of
Stack of comics. Have a great day.